The arena on Vrillon Prime was unlike anything a human had ever seen. Thousands of alien spectators filled the towering seats, their roars shaking the ground. In the center stood Koresh, the undefeated champion of the planet's most brutal combat trials. She was young, with green skin that caught the sunlight and eyes like molten gold. Her silver hair spilled down her shoulders as she twirled a massive golden axe in one hand. She had just made a bold declaration to the crowd, her voice carrying over the noise, promising marriage to any human who could defeat her in battle. Laughter followed her words, loud and mocking, as if the very idea was a joke to her people. Among the onlookers was a single human, standing silently at the edge of the sand. His name was Marcus Hale, a soldier who had fought in wars far from this world. His armor was dented, his weapons plain compared to the ornate alien gear around him. Yet his eyes never wavered from Koresh. The crowd didn't notice him at first, but those who did laughed at the thought of a human daring to challenge their champion. Koresh's smirk deepened when she spotted him stepping forward. She had fought dozens of alien warriors, some twice her size, but never a human. Her people told stories about humans being quick, cunning, and dangerously unpredictable, but she had never seen proof. She assumed they were exaggerated tales. Still, something in Marcus's calm expression unsettled her. He wasn't shouting, boasting, or posturing. He simply adjusted his grip on his sword and waited. The arena master signaled for the fight to begin. The sand shifted beneath their feet as they circled each other. Koresh's first swing came fast. A blur of golden steel meant to end the fight instantly. Marcus ducked under it, rolling across the arena floor. The crowd roared at his audacity. She pressed the attack, each strike faster and heavier, but he blocked and sidestepped, his movements precise and measured. It wasn't the style of someone trying to impress. It was the style of someone trying to survive and win. For the first time in years, Koresh felt her pulse quicken. This was no ordinary opponent. Every time she thought she had him cornered, he slipped away. Every feint she threw, he read it before she committed. It was infuriating and exhilarating all at once. She began to change her tactics, testing his reactions with different angles and speeds. Still, he matched her, as if he had studied her every move long before they met. Marcus was patient, but he was not passive. In a sudden burst of speed, he stepped inside her guard, his blade sliding against the shaft of her axe. She barely blocked. In time, their weapons locking together. Their eyes met for the first time, and in that moment, Koresh saw something she hadn't expected. Determination without fear. It wasn't arrogance. It was resolve. And for a heartbeat, she almost forgot the crowd existed. The lock broke, and they separated, each breathing harder than before. Koresh grinned, truly grinned, for the first time in a fight. "Better than I thought," she said aloud, though her voice was barely audible over the crowd. Marcus didn't answer. He was already moving, forcing her to defend rather than attack. She realized he wasn't just reacting, he was pushing her toward a mistake. The realization made her laugh, even as she struggled to keep up. Around them, the spectators sensed something unusual. The champion was being tested in a way they had never seen. Every clash of weapons sent sparks into the air, every dodge and strike drawing gasps from the stands. The promise Koresh had made now hung over, the arena like a shadow. She had declared it in jest, but with each passing second, it felt less like a joke and more like a possibility. ChatGPT said, Koresh had fought countless battles, but this one was different. Every swing of her axe felt heavier, not from fatigue, but from the pressure Marcus created. He moved with a rhythm she couldn't break, slipping in and out of reach like water flowing around stone. The audience had shifted from jeering to roaring, sensing that their champion's dominance was no longer certain. She tightened her grip and launched a fierce overhead strike. Marcus sidestepped, the blade crashing into the sand where he had stood a moment before. He countered with a quick slash toward her shoulder, forcing her to twist away. The motion was smooth, but the close call made her realize she could not underestimate him. Her pride demanded she win, but her instincts told her this fight would not be easy. The clang of metal on metal echoed across the arena as their weapons met again. Sparks flew, the bright light catching in Koresh's golden eyes. She began to notice his breathing. Controlled, steady, never rushed. It wasn't the breath of someone desperate to end the fight, but of someone who knew endurance could be as deadly as speed. The thought made her reassess her plan. Marcus began to advance, step by step, forcing her backward. The sand shifted under her boots as she tried to hold her ground. Each strike from him came at a different angle, unpredictable and sharp. She blocked one blow and parried another, but the force behind his movements carried a weight she could not ignore. It was not just muscle, it was experience. She had thought his plain armor and simple weapon were signs of weakness. Now she realized they were marks of a warrior who had survived more battles than his appearance suggested. Every scar on his blade was a story. Every dent in his armor was proof of survival. The realization stirred a feeling she hadn't expected. Respect. Her laughter returned, louder this time, echoing through the arena. "You're better than I imagined, human," she called, her voice carrying over the shouts of the crowd. Marcus did not respond. His silence felt deliberate, a way to keep her guessing. That silence pushed her to fight harder, her strikes faster and more aggressive than before. The crowd was on their feet now, the tension spreading like fire. The promise Koresh had made before the fight was no longer just entertainment, it had become a dangerous wager. Every spectator watched for the moment when one of them would fall. Some shouted her name, others began chanting his. It was a sound she had never heard in her own arena before. She launched a low sweep with the axe, trying to take his legs from under him. He leapt over it, spinning mid-air to bring his sword down toward her exposed side. She blocked in the nick of time, the impact rattling through her arms. They broke apart again, both breathing hard, but neither ready to yield. In that instant, Koresh felt something strange. She didn't want this fight to end too quickly. Koresh steadied her breathing and studied Marcus with sharper focus. His movements were not random, but part of a strategy that revealed itself piece by piece. She realized he was watching her as closely as she was watching him, learning from every feint, every strike, every glance. It was the kind of focus she had only seen in warriors who fought not for glory but for survival. The next exchange came fast, with Marcus stepping inside her range again. She twisted to avoid his blade, but he shifted direction mid-swing, forcing her to block awkwardly. The vibration from the clash traveled through her arms, reminding her of the strength behind his precision. He wasn't trying to overpower her, he was trying to control the pace, and that made him even more dangerous. She responded with a sudden burst of speed, her axe slicing through the air in a wide arc. Marcus ducked under it, the blade whistling, past his head. He countered with a strike aimed at her side, but she spun away using the momentum to reset her stance. The crowd roared louder with every near miss, the tension thick enough to feel in the air. Sweat gathered along her brow, though the fight had only gone on minutes. It wasn't exhaustion. It was the strain of maintaining constant awareness. She could feel the energy of the crowd pressing in from all sides, each cheer feeding her determination. Marcus's expression remained unreadable, his eyes locked on hers, unshaken by the noise around them. She decided to test him with a feint, raising her axe high as if to strike, only to pivot and drive her boot toward his chest. He caught her foot with his arm, pushing her backward without losing his balance. The move earned murmurs from the crowd, who were unused to seeing her attacks countered so cleanly. Her grin returned, sharper than before. "You're not like the others," she said, circling him slowly. Her voice carried not just challenge, but curiosity. Marcus shifted his grip on his sword but stayed silent. The lack of banter felt almost like a challenge of its own, as if words were unnecessary until the fight was decided. It made her want to break that calm, to see what was under it. The fight grew faster, their weapons clashing in a blur. Sand sprayed under their feet, their movements carving patterns into the arena floor. Koresh could feel her arms burning, but her pride refused to let her slow down. Marcus met her every move with equal force, and for the first time in years, she felt the thrill of not knowing the outcome. A sudden strike from Marcus forced her onto one knee, the flat of his blade pressing against her shoulder. Gasps echoed from the crowd, but before anyone could call the fight, she rolled away and sprang back to her feet. The moment had been close, too close, and it lit a fire in her chest. She had promised to marry any human who could defeat her, but now she wanted something else even more. She wanted to see just how far this fight could go. Koresh lunged forward with a sudden strike, her axe flashing under the bright arena lights. Marcus twisted to the side, the blade missing him by inches. He answered with a quick slash toward her thigh, forcing her to hop back to avoid the edge. Their breathing grew heavier, and the sound of metal clashing filled the arena like a storm. She narrowed her eyes, trying to read his next move. His stance shifted just enough to suggest a strike to her left, but when she reacted, he drove forward to her right. The trick worked, and she barely managed to deflect the blow. The crowd erupted, some cheering for her resilience, others for the human's cunning. It had been a long time since anyone had divided her people's loyalty like this. Marcus didn't waste energy on wild attacks. Every swing was calculated, meant to force her into a position where he could strike cleanly. She realized that while her people fought with power and speed, he fought with patience and precision. It was a style she found both frustrating and fascinating. Her mind worked as fast as her body, trying to find the flaw in his approach. The odd air between them seemed to grow hotter as the match continued. Sunlight poured through the open roof of the arena, casting sharp shadows on the sand. Sweat ran down Koresh's neck, but she didn't care. Her focus was locked on the human in front of her, the only opponent who had made her feel alive in years. She charged, raising her axe high for a crushing blow. At the last second, Marcus dropped low, sliding across the sand to avoid her swing entirely. He came up behind her, the tip of his sword grazing the back of her armor. She spun to face him, her grin widening as she realized he was forcing her to fight at her absolute best. Her strikes became sharper, her movements tighter. Every mistake could mean the end of the fight, and she knew it. The crowd's cheers grew louder, echoing off the arena walls. Some called for her to finish him, others shouted for the human to take the win. The noise was a constant roar in her ears, but it only fueled her drive. Marcus blocked another heavy strike, the clash ringing through the air. He stepped back, studying her with that same unreadable expression. It was as though he wasn't just fighting, he was learning her, adapting to her style with every second. That thought made her heart pound harder, not from fear, but from something dangerously close to excitement. As they circled each other again, Koresh's earlier words came back to her mind. She had spoken them as a challenge, certain no human could ever reach this point. But now, with each strike and counter, she began to wonder if her bold declaration might soon be tested. And for the first time, the idea didn't fill her with dread. It filled her with anticipation. Koresh launched into a furious series of strikes, her axe moving so fast it blurred in the air. Marcus blocked the first two, sidestepped the third, and met the fourth with a clash that sent vibrations up both their arms. She could feel his strength through the weapon, solid and unyielding. Every time she thought she had him on the defensive, he found a way to turn the tide back in his favor. The crowd had gone beyond simple cheers now. They shouted in waves, their voices merging into a wall of sound that pressed in on the fighters. Koresh barely heard them. Her focus was locked entirely on the human in front of her. His breathing had quickened, but his stance stayed steady. He wasn't showing signs of panic, only the same calm intensity that had carried him through the fight so far. Marcus waited for her next move, letting her circle like a predator testing its prey. But when she lunged, he met her halfway, the clash of their weapons ringing sharp and clear. Their faces were close enough for her to see the determination in his eyes. It wasn't just about winning for him, it was about proving something deeper. She recognized that drive because she had felt it herself many times before. She feinted a high strike, then twisted her body to sweep at his legs. He jumped back, barely avoiding the sweep, and countered with a thrust toward her chest. She twisted, away just in time, the tip of his blade skimming her armor. The exchange left them both panting but neither willing to slow down. In that moment, it became a battle of will as much as skill. Her axe came down again, but Marcus caught the shaft in his hands, locking them in a contest of strength. For a moment they stood frozen, each trying to overpower the other. The muscles in her arms burned, and she could feel the steady pressure of his push. The lock broke when they shoved each other back, sand scattering under their boots. Koresh's laughter rang out again, bright and unrestrained. "You're the first to push me this far," she called, her voice carrying easily over the noise. Marcus didn't reply, but there was the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, almost a smile. That single hint of reaction only drove her to fight harder, desperate to see more of it. The exchange of blows became faster, sharper, each one carrying more weight than the last. Sparks flew from the constant clashes, and the crowd roared with every near hit. Koresh's chest rose and fell rapidly, but her energy didn't wane. She felt alive, more than she had in any battle before. And somewhere deep inside, she began to feel that losing to this human might not be the disgrace she once thought it would be. Marcus struck again, and she blocked, their weapons locking for just a heartbeat. In that frozen instant, they stared into each other's eyes, and the crowd's roar seemed to fade. It was just the two of them now. Two warriors bound by a fight neither wanted to end. Koresh felt something stir within her, and she realized. The promise she had made before this fight was no longer just a game. It was becoming a path she might truly follow. Koresh's muscles burned with every movement, but she refused to let her pace slow. Marcus moved like a shadow, matching her strike for strike, forcing her to think faster than she ever had before. The heat of the arena wrapped around them, but neither fighter seemed to notice. Every clash of their weapons sent a ripple through the crowd, who had fallen into a tense silence between bursts of cheers. She swung her axe in a heavy arc, but Marcus ducked low, rolling beneath her arm, and striking upward. The edge of his blade scraped her armor, leaving a faint mark. She spun to face him, eyes blazing with renewed determination. He didn't waste the moment, stepping in again to keep the pressure on. She had to admit, even to herself, that he was unlike anyone she had faced. The fight no longer felt like a simple contest. It had become a test of understanding, two warriors reading each other's strengths and weaknesses with every second. Koresh could feel herself adapting to his style just as he adapted to hers. It was as though the arena itself had vanished, leaving only the sand beneath their feet and the space between their strikes. Marcus deflected her next blow and used the momentum to push her back a step. She dug her heels into the sand, refusing to be forced into retreat. Her grin widened as she realized she was enjoying the battle too much to think about anything else. The promise she had shouted before the fight echoed in her mind, but it no longer sounded like a distant joke. It sounded like a decision waiting to be made. She feinted to his right, then spun to his left, bringing her axe down in a sweeping blow. Marcus blocked it, the force rattling his arms, but he held his ground. Their eyes met again in that instant, and Koresh felt something strange, an unspoken respect that went beyond the fight itself. It was a connection forged in the heat of battle, and she knew it was rare. The noise of the crowd swelled, but the two of them barely noticed. Koresh's focus was locked entirely on Marcus, and she could see that his was locked on her. Neither looked for an easy victory anymore. They wanted to push each other to the very limit, to find out who they truly were when strength and skill were stripped bare. With a sudden burst of energy, Marcus launched a strike that nearly knocked her weapon from her hands. She recovered in time, but the move forced her to acknowledge the truth. He could win. And if he did, she would honor her words. Not because the crowd expected it, but because she wanted to. The thought made her heart race in a way no fight ever had. They clashed again, the sound of steel filling the arena one final time. When the weapons parted, Koresh found herself breathing hard, staring at the human who had come farther than anyone else. She felt no anger at the possibility of defeat. Instead, she felt anticipation for what might come after. For the first time, she was ready to keep her promise. Marcus adjusted his stance, his boots sinking slightly into the sand as he prepared for her next move. Koresh tightened her grip on her axe, feeling the weight of it like an extension of her own body. The sun caught in the silver of her hair, and her golden eyes locked on him with fierce focus. Around them, the crowd had gone nearly silent, waiting for the moment that would decide everything. She moved first, driving forward with a flurry of strikes that forced Marcus to give ground. Each swing was heavy, but she blended speed into her attacks, leaving him little time to counter. He blocked and parried with calm precision, his sword meeting her weapon at just the right angles. Even as sweat ran down his face, his control never faltered. Marcus suddenly shifted, stepping into her attack range instead of retreating. The move caught her off guard, and his blade grazed her side, leaving a shallow mark in the armor. She twisted away and retaliated with a sweeping strike that forced him to duck low. The speed of their movements drew gasps from the crowd, the fight now moving at a pace that few could follow. Her mind raced as fast as her weapon. She realized that this human was not fighting for the approval of the crowd or for the glory of victory. He was fighting for the challenge itself, and perhaps for her respect. That thought sent a strange thrill through her, one she had never felt toward an opponent before. Koresh's laughter rang out, sharp and clear. "You fight as if you've been here before," she called, circling him slowly. Marcus gave no answer, but his eyes never left hers. She could feel the tension between them, built from every strike, every glance, every narrow escape from defeat. They collided again, the sound of steel echoing through the arena. Marcus pushed hard, forcing her backward until her boots nearly touched the arena wall. She twisted free and countered with an overhead strike that sent sparks flying as it met his blade. The crowd erupted, sensing they were witnessing the climax of a battle that would be remembered. Her arms ached, but she pushed the pain aside. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest, yet her spirit refused to yield. Marcus looked equally, worn, but the fire in his eyes burned as fiercely as when the fight began. They had pushed each other beyond the limits of strength, into the territory where only willpower remained. As they faced each other once more, Koresh knew the end was near. The promise she had made at the start of this battle no longer felt like a boast meant to amuse the crowd. It felt like a truth waiting to be fulfilled, and the thought did not frighten her. Instead, it filled her with a strange sense of anticipation. The air in the arena felt heavier now, every breath carrying the weight of what was about to happen. Marcus and Koresh stood a few steps apart, weapons ready, eyes locked. Neither moved. For several heartbeats, both waiting for the other to make the first move. The crowd leaned forward in anticipation, the silence before the storm stretching long enough to make even seasoned warriors uneasy. Koresh lunged first, her axe flashing, under the bright light as she swung for his shoulder. Marcus sidestepped, turning the motion into a counter-strike aimed for her midsection. She twisted her body just enough to deflect the blow, sparks flying from the contact. The sound of steel scraping steel echoed high above them, breaking the fragile stillness that had settled moments before. They exchanged strikes in a blur, each one faster and heavier than the last. Koresh's boots dug into the sand with every movement, her balance perfect despite the speed of her attacks. Marcus's sword seemed to be everywhere at once, parrying, blocking, and striking with unwavering accuracy. The crowd's cheers became a constant roar, but neither fighter's focus wavered. A sudden opening appeared, and Marcus seized it. His blade slipped past her guard, the edge resting against her throat before she could pull away. The arena went silent in an instant, the only sound their heavy breathing. Koresh froze, her eyes locking with his, golden fire meeting the steady steel of his gaze. For a long moment, they did not move. Then, with a slow breath, Koresh lowered her weapon and stepped back. The crowd erupted into a deafening roar, half in shock, half in celebration. She had been undefeated for years, yet here she was, beaten by a human. And to her surprise, the thought filled her with pride rather than shame. "You've earned more than a victory," she said, her voice carrying over the chaos. Her golden eyes softened, and for the first time in the fight, her expression showed something beyond confidence. It was respect and perhaps something deeper. The words she had shouted before the battle now became a promise she fully intended to keep. Marcus stood in the center of the arena, his chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. He gave no grand gesture, no boast, only a nod that told her he understood the weight of what she had said. Around them, the spectators continued to cheer, the story of this match already spreading through the city like wildfire. Koresh stepped closer, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You've beaten me, human," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "And now, by my own words, you are to be my mate." The crowd's cheers grew even louder, sealing the moment in history. What had begun as a challenge born of arrogance had ended as the start of something neither of them had expected.